So welcome to the last of the year's webinars. Can't believe it's already December. So welcome, Father Christmas. Father Christmas comes in the form of Adam Lloyd this evening. Adam has just recently finished our course, CISN certificate course. He is also studying his master's degree at Worcester University, where he's doing footballing within his thesis. So he's literally right in the depth of football, and he's a perfect person to work on this with you. He's also the nutritionist for academy football at Cheltenham Town. So he'll tell you about specific case studies within this presentation. Like other webinars, we've got the chat box, so please jump on the chat box and tell us who you are, what you do, what you'd like to learn. And throughout the presentation, feel free to put questions down. If there's any relevant ones to what Adam's talking about, I'll ask him to respond. Otherwise, we'll wait till sort of 45 minutes when he finishes his presentation, and then we'll go on to our Q&A section. All right. So, Adam, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Ian. And firstly, thank you for inviting me on to talk about this. It's been really enjoyable to put the slides together and to just think about what I've been doing, and so I've really enjoyed it. I think if we let me just bear with me. Let me just see if I can get that down. So as Ian's just said, I'm currently studying. I'm at the dissertation stage of my master's at the University of Worcester, and I'm also the academy nutritionist at Cheltenham Town Football Club. So I deal with the under-9s all the way up to the under-18s in that football club. And what I thought I would try to do, I have a private practice in town here as well, and online, which everybody does have now, with COVID and everything. And what I thought I would try to do is to sort of bring this all in together to kind of talk about how my practice informed my studying, how my studying informed my practice, and just kind of take you through a journey on that. I think I consider myself very lucky, because what most people kind of use their dad to get them a job, and I actually I did it the other way around. I used my son to help get me a job, because my sons play academy football. They're in the academy at Cheltenham, and so I started my life there as an academy dad. So this is a picture of the facilities down at Cheltenham, which are lovely, on a lovely sort of, I think that was a spring day earlier this year. And I got to know the coaches, as you do, being a dad down there. And then, started to understand a bit about the setup, and just we're talking maybe just over 2 years ago now. I just said to the group, could I help out? Is there anything I could do nutritionally to support? And told them what I was doing. And at the time, I was starting to specialize. I was about to go on and do Ian's course, and starting to specialize in sports nutrition in my private practice. And so it just worked really nicely. And actually, as you'll see, I had an interest in the youth side. I've always had an interest in football, so it just kind of went really nicely. And it started off, I had to kind of prove myself. So there's lots of presentations and lots of talking to the coaches down there, talking to the staff, and then that's progressed into a formal position down there at the football club. And Cheltenham Town, for those that are involved in football, Cheltenham Town is a although in League One and doing great this season in League One, their academy is a Cat 3 academy. So the Cat 1 academies are the top Premier League clubs, most of them. And then it goes Cat 2 down to Cat 3 based on how far they recruit and the facilities that they've got. So it's not, I think it's becoming more common but it's maybe not too common to have a nutritionist at a Cat 3 academy. So there, yeah. I will just say, you know, a word on Cheltenham as well is that, you know, just a really open-minded group of people there, really keen to explore what nutrition had to offer for their group, not only for performance as well, very open to the idea. It was about health and it was about education for the athletes, for the academy football players, but also for parents and for guardians and digs, the guys that are staying in digs and things like that. So, you know, just been really, the last 2 years have been brilliant in terms of just an open book to go and try and do things and try and make a difference. So yeah. Also, just a note on private practice. I have a private practice in Cheltenham, and I started to just get my name out there in terms of in this local area as being an academy nutritionist dealing with younger football players. And so I started to see other football players from other academies in my private practice, which has been great. Okay, so I'm going to start just talking about what we did at Cheltenham initially, and this. So just to kind of frame this, at this point, I hadn't started my master's, so I basically qualified as a nutritionist, qualified as a nutritional therapist. That was my route to practice. And I'd taken a year out, and the intention, I lose track of time, but the intention was to kind of have a year out of studying. I couldn't quite bring myself to do that, so I ended up doing the CISN course with Ian in that year out, and then I was going to make a decision about whether I go back or not. So when I started to work with these are the scholars group, which is the first group I started working with. I hadn't formalized what I was going to be doing for a dissertation. I wasn't even sure I would necessarily be doing it. But when I started work with the academy, we sort of said, well, what's the best way in which we could start this process? You know, if you're starting something from afresh, what's the best way? And one of the things I've always tried to do is to go from the player's perspective first of all, you know, because I guess it would have been easy to say, well, you know, we need 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate before a game. So, right, let's start doing that. I felt that if Cheltenham, if the football club would support it, why not ask the players what's going on, you know? And so I proposed that we would have one-to-ones with all of the under 18 group for that season, which was 25. And we sat down and you know, again, the club were brilliant. I had 45 minutes with every player. I asked all the players to complete a food diary for me. Not everyone did that. Young lads, it's difficult to get them to fill in forms and do things, but a lot did. And you know, but I did have that 45 minutes with each of them, and it was really great to just talk to them about their ideas about nutrition. Talk to them about whether they even thought nutrition was a factor for them. What were some of the challenges they faced around nutrition? And I think that time at the start of the process really has been invaluable to me in sort of forming how I've moved forward as an academy nutritionist. And what we now do is we do that every year. So it's not, we don't have to do as many as 25 because we get the new intake of first years coming into that group. And so depending on what the intake is, it's different every year. We just do the one-to-ones with that group and then move on. And, you know, again, with the food diaries, I've got some pictures here of the food diaries they completed. It was very, you know, it was very basic. Some of them just did it on a piece of A4. Some of them filled in my form. But it was just great to get an idea of how these boys were eating. And I did a little bit of, with some of the lads, I did some analysis. So, I did do some nutritics with them. And that was more just to be able to show the group what that looked like, to be able to show the football club what that looked like. But quite quickly, I was able to get a feel for what was going on and what were some of the real sort of obvious findings across the board. And they all kind of, a lot of them seem to face the same sort of challenges. And I kind of grouped them like this, that it was underfueling, was the first one. I just not knowing how much to eat, not knowing how much they were expending, and what that meant in terms of the volumes of food or the amounts of eating episodes that they could have. I felt that collectively, I would maybe say undernourished. It's maybe a bit of a big term to say, but I think collectively, probably the quality of food wasn't quite wasn't there, and not for want of trying, just for not necessarily knowing what the best thing to do. And yeah, I think perhaps some were guilty of treating, not, I would say now, they weren't coming at it from a health first perspective. They weren't thinking about food as being this sort of structure on which they could build health and then performance. They really just thought of food as perhaps maybe a Lucozade before a game that will help me. That's nutrition, that's sports nutrition, and maybe a banana will help me, So they weren't considering like the health. And really, I suppose they were, if anybody's got kids, then they were just boys. They were boys, or maybe they were just kids. There was no surprises when it come to eating, really. They were doing the same things that all kids are doing. And I'll maybe talk a bit more about that as we go along. And so when I sort of looked at the comparing what was the practice, what were the practice versus research, what was I being asked? What were they interested in? How would I start off a conversation about nutrition? And perhaps naively, I went into it maybe thinking I might talk about different things. But really, what we saw was that the boys really saw nutrition perhaps as just a way of manipulating body composition. That was all that was the extent of what they saw it as, and they saw it primarily, maybe just before training or just before and after the gym. And interestingly, again, I come to talk about this as we move on, but interestingly, the research really sort of backs that up. That and not surprisingly either, you wouldn't necessarily expect them to think of it in any different way. They just saw it as manipulating body composition. The questions in the early days that I would get asked was, how can I add muscle? How much protein should I eat? Should I be taking creatine? What kind of pre-workout should I take? And I get asked that over and over and over again. And again, when you think about the context of which these boys are in, they're some of them are in their last year of academy football before they're about to either become, they're fighting for a professional contract, essentially. And so there's a lot of talk between, sort of academy football into men's football, and adding muscle, becoming more muscular, becoming stronger is a real factor for these boys. And they saw that very much, that at this point, they saw it very much as protein shakes, BCAAs, pre-workouts, creatine. That was the kind of how they felt they were going to add muscle. What I say in the early days, it was like, when I got the group together, it was like speaking to a group of trainee bodybuilders, not speaking to a group of footballers. Their sort of their focus where nutrition was concerned was on the wrong sort of things. This is where I started to think. I start, because I was thinking, I've got an opportunity to do a master's, I've got an opportunity to do a study, and I started to try and to think that this might be an area that I could investigate. So, and then what I wanted, what I really wanted in those early days was I wanted them to start to think about food differently. I wanted them to start seeing what food could do for them, rather than seeing what the powders could do for them. And I wanted them to see what's in, the pictures that are in front of you now, as that's nutrition, not the powders or the tubs and things like that. I wanted to strip it right back and get back to that level. That what you eat in the morning, that is about performance nutrition. What you eat for lunch, that's performance nutrition, not what you get out of your bag in a tub and then put into a shaker. And so obviously there was a lot, there was a lot of work to be done to get that. And of course, as I've already said, there was an element that they were, and I see this perhaps in private practice as well, is that they don't necessarily think about the quality, they think about the quantity. And so, a chicken breast, a chicken burger from KFC, for them was the same as a organic chicken breast. And again, I'm not saying that we should be getting academy footballers to eat organic chicken breast. It's just as an example, they didn't necessarily see that perspective. So this brings me to the first element, and what I'm going to try and do through the presentation is just touch on different case studies. I think I've got 4 case studies, and I'm not going to talk in detail about players. What I'm going to do is just take little themes from conversations I've had with people and from little bits of work that I've done with people. So these are kind of made up people, but they kind of sum up a little area that someone might have been looking at. So we take Scott, and Scott in this example was one of the first guys that I worked with, and he in his consultation with me, Scott's quote is that I eat chicken nuggets and chips. That's all right, isn't it? And again, there was a little bit of like, just trying to get a rise and perhaps knowing that certain things weren't right, but just, trying to see where I sat with it all. But Scott was very much from the point of view of, if I exercise, then I'm fit and healthy, and a lot of these boys are very talented football players. And we're talking about a Cat 3 academy. So we're not talking about Manchester United here, but they are very talented football players, and they are, some of them are going to go on to become professional footballers and make a career out of it, so they're gifted individuals, they're gifted athletes, and it's come very easy for them, a lot of it, in terms of their ability, it's come very easy. But when I got into it with Scott, he was struggling with energy. He was actually struggling with motivation and drive as well. And he was struggling to sustain performance over 90 minutes, and when we started to talk about what was happening, when we started to talk about his intake, one of the real overall themes that came through was this level of quality, and perhaps a potato and a chicken breast, cooked, might be different to packaged chicken nuggets and oven chips, and so we really started to think about that. Now, I'm sort of generalizing here. The other kind of topic that came in was to really try to get Scott to eat much more variation in terms of vegetables and fruits and salads and things like that, to add in the much needed nutrients. Because, and again, it's easy for me to say this is an ongoing process with the boys. So it's not necessarily that we went from A, we took him to B, and what a success it was. It's ongoing, and I would say that Scott probably definitely eats chicken nuggets and chips still. However, through the conversations we've had, does he struggle with energy so much anymore? No, he doesn't. Has his attitude changed? Yeah, it actually has. And can he keep that performance going for 90 minutes? Well, yeah, he can, and there are other things going on, in terms of his strength and conditioning, in terms of other things. But these are definite things that we've moved through. So that kind of brings me on to my masters and what was I going to do? And I really felt strongly, I got to this point, I started working with the lads, and I really felt strongly that I could do some research with them, and I could work with them, and we could really enhance what we were doing through the collaboration between academic and the practical side of things. I also, the academy were on board, so it was brilliant. I had a cohort already. I had participants for a study, which is obviously for people who've done an MSc, that's or any project, that's difficult enough. So that was a first hurdle. I also had some other academies interested, and so I talked to a few people that I've been speaking to in the sports nutrition world, and they were like, yeah, it sounds great. We'll try and help you out. So I thought, we've got something here. And as I've said earlier, I felt really strongly that I wanted the boys to have a voice. So I didn't want to just make them pawns in the research. I didn't want to just take advantage of Cheltenham's hospitality in a way. I wanted to really make it valuable to them. So we ended up with nutrition knowledge. And we started to, we thought about doing behaviors, attitudes. But when I talked to Derek Kite, Dr. Derek Kite is my supervisor at University of Worcester. We just started to strip it right back and say, let's just focus on nutrition. Let's just focus on knowledge. And we felt that if we could get a good understanding of levels of knowledge in this group, that it would really help us that at the end of this, we could have a really great education intervention. Because we wouldn't just be plucking out from the research what was going on. We'd be taking it directly from the horse's mouth and be able to plug the gaps. And so that's what we did. I also found that it hasn't, and it's not an area that's been overly researched. There's not a lot of research on academy football players, not where nutrition knowledge is concerned. There is some brilliant research coming out of Liverpool, John Moores, Marcus Hannon, and other people like that with Everton and Aston Villa and different clubs. And they've been doing some, brilliant stuff, which I'll talk about shortly. But in terms of actual knowledge, the nutrition knowledge of academy football players, there didn't seem to be that much research out there. So that was an opportunity again. The project did create some logistical challenges, though. Firstly, in terms of how would we assess knowledge, and when we start looking at how you assess nutrition knowledge, the different questionnaires provide a problem. There's no real one clean way of doing that, and so we had to kind of decide on a sports nutrition questionnaire, and I actually decided in the end to use one that had been validated in adults, and I felt that was important. Firstly, because it had been validated, but secondly, because I felt that I wanted to be able to compare this group, even though they were adolescents, to compare this group to adults and how adults would fare with the same nutrition questionnaire. So that's what we did. And so we started to look at what does an academy footballer need. And so there's the UEFA expert group statement on nutrition in football has been absolutely brilliant to help me structure what I'm doing. And I think there was an initial statement done like this. I think it's 95. Ron Morner had done this, and then this group here had updated it in 2020. And in the updated version, in this version that's in front of you, there was a topic, a particular topic for junior footballers. And so where we could see in the old statement, there was I think there was a couple of paragraphs about youth footballers, but it had got bigger, and it was a particular statement now. And I think that shows how the research is progressing and moving forward, and that we're not now seeing these athletes, these academy players or youth athletes, as mini adults. They are distinct. They have their own requirements. They are a distinct group. And so it was great for me to be able to see this in this expert group statement. And one of the sentences I'm going to read out here, because I felt very strongly that we were doing something more than just preparing footballers for football matches. We were doing something which was more substantial than that. And the research shows this, and so I'll just read the statement first of all. Lifelong buy-in to optimize growth, health, performance, recovery, training adaptations, and body composition. So if we can affect a youth athlete's ideas about nutrition, if we can start talking to them about nutrition at this young age, in this window, this adolescent window, what the research tells us is that we are able to affect a person's lifelong attitudes to nutritional input, which I just thought was absolutely amazing, because there's so much noise out there where nutrition's concerned, that being able to get in and get the right it's not even like the right messages, but just trying to explain the context of nutrition to these young people was just so brilliant. And we also start to see that these adolescents have got different, they're in a phase of growth, so they've got really, big challenges, big nutritional needs, and other little bits which I maybe we'll go into if we've time at the end. So this was the expert statement was brilliant. It started me along the track of knowing that there was something here. So what does the research say in terms of adolescent nutrition knowledge? And here we couldn't really go to footballers in terms of knowledge here. I've already said this. It was we had to sort of go around to other sports and other countries. And again, you come up with the same challenges with research all over. Is that what's the cohort? Who can we get? And often it ends up being college students, because they're there, and they're accessible for research, that type of thing. So it was really sort of interesting to start to look at it. And there's lots of research, America, Italy, Germany, UK, in loads of different sports, basketball, American football. We had track athletes. We had all kinds of different sports. But the themes that started to come out of the review of the literature were adolescents involved in sports don't always make healthful food choices, and I think that's reasonable. They don't always have the best food options available to them. And if I go down to our local running track and I look in the vending machine there, then that's true. It's true. But they do have unique energy and nutrient demands. And adolescents need diets that provide adequate macronutrients, as well as iron, calcium, vitamin D, phosphorus, and fluids. And I think you could probably go across the board with all the micronutrients there. What we started to find was there was a real theme about athletes restricting energy intake, sometimes intentionally, because they were their type of sport they were involved in was aesthetic or was weight bearing, within weight categories, so they had to do that type of thing. But others didn't have that demand and were still restricting energy intake, and so they were possibly being more at risk of energy deficiency syndromes, so overtraining syndromes, red S, those types of conditions. Also, where we said at the start that they don't always make healthful food choices, they also, those that were more prone to eat more processed foods in their diet were also prone to energy deficiencies, not getting enough in, and again being nutrient depleted or nutrient poor. The timing of the meals was found to be a concern. And contributed to poor energy intake, as was skipping meals, and I'll come on to that in a minute. And again, I reiterate that some of the challenges with the research in terms of collectively bringing this all together was that every study I looked at used a different questionnaire pretty much, and the questionnaires were asking different things about what sport nutrition was. They were asking about different things, and so it was very difficult to kind of get a collective together. However, some of the research, as I've already alluded to, particularly in academy footballers here in the UK, was really, really important and really informative. And so we started to understand the energy requirements of these academy footballers. And I've already talked about Marcus Hannon, and he's done some fantastic research which has looked at how much energy these athletes require. And again, roughly the figures, I guess, not necessarily important for now, but just in terms, under 18 players were coming out around about 3,500 calories. Under 15 players were coming out around about 3,000 calories. And under 12s and 13 players were coming out at around about 2,800 calories. In terms of their need, their requirements, what were they expending? And then we started to see through that we could start to have some carbohydrate and protein requirements that could be bespoke for these youth athletes. So one of the sentences that I think is also reiterated in the expert group statement as well was that when we look at energy expenditure for these academy players, they were sometimes comparable to or exceeding that was previously reported in Premier League football players, in adult Premier League football players. So this is I found this really interesting because, you know, particularly as we come down the footballing pyramid where money isn't quite so available, you know, I know in certainly across Cat 2, Cat 3 academies, you know, the first team are going into the canteen first of all. They're eating what they need, and then whatever's left is coming to our academy. And I was thinking, well, but this needs to be turned on its head. You've got to let these first team boys wait, and I've got to get my lads in because they're the ones that need it. Now, of course, I haven't succeeded in that one just yet, but we'll keep going. And so yeah, so again, it just is quite. I think it's worth just stressing again. You know, we could be looking at these football players, Mo Salah, you know, Paul Pogba, these superstars of the game, but our lads in the academy have got higher requirements than them. So that brings me on to my next case study, and this one, you know, I've called Jaden, and Jaden's quote to me was, "I eat in the morning, but then not again until I get home in the evening." And this wasn't, I would say, it wasn't uncommon. But this Jaden was perhaps more of an extreme. Some of the things that Jaden was struggling with was his form. He was struggling to really get you know, catch fire in the games, struggling to adapt. So he'd moved into a new area, and he was finding that adapting process difficult. Struggled to apply himself. Again, so, you know, there's lots of information these boys have to have. Where have I got to stand at corners? Where am I standing at throw-ins? What happens at free kicks? Who's doing what? You know, you've got to be able to listen and focus along with the studies they were having to do as well. So there's a lot going on for them. And and so Jaden was coming in, and he was maybe having his cereal in the morning, and then he wasn't eating again. So he wasn't taking the food that was on offer for him, and he wasn't eating again. Now, having just said Jaden was an under 18 player, and you know, having just said that those players need 3,500 calories, I would estimate Jaden was getting close to 1,000 calories a day, you know, and so no wonder he's struggling. And when we talked about this, it wasn't like Jaden knew what he was doing. It wasn't like he thought, yeah, I'm doing, you know, I know I'm doing it. I know, you know, he just had no idea that this was a factor for him. Now it's a difficult one because these lads come with you know, lots of challenges, and no one person is you know, same as another. So it was difficult with Jaden to kind of get him to eat more. He'd come from a background where that wasn't easy for him, and so what we've really tried to get down into the details of it here, and you know, there were times where I would be on the training pitch and I would see him running, and I would say, "What are you burning now? You know, what are you actually burning now?" You know, and just to get him to connect that fact that sprint, that run, he needed nutrients for that. He needed energy for that, and that was coming from his food. And if he hasn't eaten since 8 o'clock and he's expecting to train, you know, until 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the grass, then that was going to be a challenge for his body. And we started to talk about fueling for performance and what do the nutrients do, and really very basic conversations about carbohydrates for energy, protein to rebuild, those types of things. So then we get to the results of my my research. I am aware of the time, Ian, so I'll kind of speed up. So with the questionnaire I used, anything over 76% was going to be excellent knowledge. And the research generally finds that adolescent athletes particularly are in the poor range. Now, again, we've got challenges here because not all of the questionnaires are the same, but generally speaking, they're in the poor range. And my results have proved to be the same. So I've come up at the moment with an overall nutrition knowledge of 43%. And the sport specific knowledge is slightly higher at 45%. But again, you know, we're in that sort of, I'm going to call it poor on here, but I wouldn't refer to that if I was talking to the lads, but just in terms of a category. And what we found through the results of the research was there was confusions about what macronutrients do in the body, you know, not unsurprisingly. What do carbohydrates do? What does protein do? There was confusion about micronutrients as well, whether we need them, how do we get them? Where do they come from? What type of foods would I get them in? And, you know, there was all this type of conversation going on. And so to give you an example of some of the questions that were asked in the questionnaire. Now, again, I used an adult questionnaire. So there were some questions in there that weren't great for adolescents, weren't great for people who you may expect to have lower knowledge. But I thought that was worth it to get through the process and to start this. So eating more energy from protein than you need can make you put on fat. Do you agree, disagree, or not sure? And we had about 40% of the respondents answered that correctly. And then we have maybe more detailed or more specific questions like the body has a limited ability to use protein for muscle protein synthesis. Excuse me. And then we had about 33% of people were answering that one correctly. Now, I'm not saying that I expect them to be answering this correctly. I just think that it's interesting, particularly when they're, you know, at the start of this process, their bags were packed full of protein, you know, so it's interesting. And that brings me to my next case study. I have no idea why I called him Juan. I have no idea, but I did. And so, again, really interesting case study. And Juan picked me off at training one day and said, I need to bulk up. He needed to bulk up. He was getting really conscious of the fact that he was coming towards the end of his second year in the scholars, and he wanted to put on muscle. And so he'd taken some advice from someone else, and he'd switched to 3 mass gainers, mass gainer products. I think again, I can't quite remember, but I think it was 50 grams of protein per serving. But what was happening was he was having genuine fatigue. He was tired. He was struggling with performance drops, and the club were worried about that, you know, as they would be. These footballers, you know, they're monitoring them constantly, and so we couldn't. He'd been chatting to a few people about this idea, and I don't know. I don't know what the answers were here, but I surmised that what possibly happens when people take protein shakes on board or take shakes on board is that they drop their other foods. You know, they just cut back because it's satisfied them, it's filled them up. They don't need the other bits. And when we started to look into it with Juan, we found that that was kind of what was happening. He'd stopped eating those other foods. He thought he was doing the right thing, taking on his mass gainers to bulk up. I think he was probably getting like maybe sort of 1,500 calories just from those 3 shakes. I think something like that. But he'd gone into massive protein breakdown, protein buildup, massive load of protein, and real drastic drop in carbohydrate. And we started to talk about, well, what might be, you know, is there a limit to the amount of protein that you can synthesize in this window? And we started to talk in those types of things, like, is it sensible to do this? And some research might say there's a ceiling, some of the research says not, you know, but we started to talk about it. And the drop in performance is from my perspective was great, because he was ready to change, he was ready to do something different. And ultimately, I think what had happened was that the increase had come at the cost of carbohydrate. And so he was relying on protein breakdown perhaps for energy, and it just wasn't there in those times that he needed it. Okay, Harry is my final case study. Same thing for Harry. You know, he was struggling with quickness over a short distance. Had the feeling that his muscles just wouldn't go, and he wanted them to go. He wanted to cover the ground quickly, but he wasn't able to do it. His quote was, he was just feeling tired. Not mentally, he said he wasn't mentally tired, but it's in his muscles, he just couldn't get going. And again, a lot of these conversations happened at the training ground. They happened just in passing. And we started again to talk about what was going on. what has happened? How is he eating? And one of the quotes from Harry was that he didn't really want to eat carbohydrate because he didn't want to put on weight. And I found that I've heard that lots of times before, and I just think it's a real shame. And what we started to do with Harry was it was maybe overly complicated. We maybe didn't even really need to do it like this, but just to get the point across, we started to a weekly periodization. So on his heavier training days or on match days, we would increase his carbohydrates, and on the rest days or the lesser training days, we would decrease them. And again, it is really challenging for those involved in football or in anything will know that where you've got matches and you've got to fit a 7-day cycle into a 2-match week, it's very difficult. So we just tried to do the best we could with that, and again get him thinking in a different way about the foods that he was eating. I put this on again. I say, so this is an example of how an academy footballer might take on 4,000 calories. Okay, so I don't think there's many occasions, many days where they would want to put on 4,000 calories, but through the conversations I've had, it came up, and it was a way of saying, well, look, this is an extreme. This is up the end, and I think that I think I've said to Ian before that I was trying to get them to eat natural foods. I was trying to get them to get their nutrients from natural foods, not from tubs. But I do now get laughed at about the cottage cheese on rice cakes with beetroot and avocado on top. So I have to confess that one didn't go down too well with the 16, 17-year-olds. But this was a way in which I was trying to get them to see how much food it required. And you can't miss 8 hours in the middle of the day and not eat, and expect to get to these amounts of carbohydrates, this amount of protein. Again, this isn't ideal. I put this in just as an example for what we were doing. Now I'm going to finish now. We're getting to the last bit. So what do I think is really going on? And do I really think that these academy footballers are all undercaloried? Are they all in risk of relative energy deficiency? I think no. I think that generally, a lot of the stuff I did on food diaries, I think they underpredicted what they were eating. And I think that there were other foods going in that they wouldn't always want to talk to me about, which were probably making up the difference. I think there were some exceptional cases where people really were undernourished and undercaloried, and those needed dealing with and needed speaking to. I think generally speaking, in terms of being undernourished, I think there's a lot of work for me to do in terms of getting them eating in a more I don't know. Let me just turn that off. Sorry. Eating in a more natural way, I guess, and not eating so many processed foods. Just right. Are they finding a balance? I think no. I think when we get players who are finding other challenges when they're struggling motivation wise, we're probably not. We're probably seeing some undercaloried or under nutrient side of things. So that's the final slide. I would just my last thing I was going to say was that I think that we've got a big challenge in the academy football side of things, or working with youth athletes. I think I don't take it lightly that we have a big responsibility to try to carry a message of eating well to these people. I do feel very strongly that I think over the next 10 years, that message will come out, will get out. And I think things like McDonald's and KFC will slip away slightly, and we'll always have those as treats, but I think people will know more how they need to fuel themselves and how they need to eat, good, proper foods. And I think our responsibility also is to try to educate parents. I haven't talked about parents really. Educate parents and educate the coaches that we deal with. I think that it's a fine balance between performance and health. And I think I always sort of side on the health side of things, whilst also making sure we toe the line with performance. Okay, great. I've got some references at the end there, Ian, but yeah, that's me. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Thanks, Adam. That was great. You can maybe unshare your screen now. We've had quite a few questions for you, so I'm going to blast through those with you. I'm going to start with Belinda's question about which validated sports nutrition questionnaire did you use?
Yeah, so we ended up with the Trackman et al.'s abridged version of their sport nutrition knowledge questionnaire. If you Google Trackman et al., you'll get it. Gina Trackman from La Trobe University in Melbourne. Again, I went for the abridged version of that because in Gina's study, it was about 12 minutes to complete, and we really felt like we needed to keep it as concise as possible to engage this group. I think possibly in hindsight, or if I go on to do more studies like this, I think I might try and do the non-abridged version. But yeah, I felt it was a really good questionnaire.
Cool. And then I've got a couple from Paul. He was asking, has peer pressure been a problem in your lads?
Yeah, Paul, hiya. Yeah, it is. It really is. And you know, the lads don't want to be goody two shoes either. You know, they don't want to be seen to, you know, you almost need to hang around behind corners and things like that as the nutritionist, because that's where they come and speak to you. And if they know that no one else is around there, you might get a really nice sort of honest conversation with them. But yeah, they're lads, and nobody wants to sort of stand out from the crowd. So peer pressure's been a big thing. And I think, Paul, you'll know this absolutely, that it sometimes works the other way as well. That if and we've spoke about this as well, that, you know, if we can get the right person doing the right things, it really has a knock-on effect to the rest of the lads. And so although in the early days, them building trust with me, seeing me around, it was difficult to get them to open up. Likewise, when we got one of the lads doing something like taking on a particular amount of carbohydrates the day before, other people started to be interested about that as well. So I think it can work both ways.
I'll just ask one more of your questions at the moment, Paul. How do you gauge success of your protocols, Adam?
Oh, great question. Yeah. I think that I think I would probably go back to this idea of how are my group responding? I mean, you if they score a last minute winner, right, and I've done a match day intervention, I've done a match day nutrition support for them, and they score a last minute winner, it's easy to think that we're on top of the world, everyone's cheering, we're going off in the change rooms, it's brilliant. It's easy to think that, you know, my nutrition is successful, and I have to step away from that. And we haven't got far enough along the line with this work yet to say that we've got meaningful data as to how the lads are responding. But we do have daily wellness questionnaires, and they do fill in how they're feeling. And again, collectively, that's not necessarily a good judge, because there's so many other things going on for them. But where I've been working with someone a bit more closely, a bit more one-to-one, and I can start to see that uplift in terms of the daily wellness questionnaire, then I think we're doing okay. But it's the outputs, the how do I know I'm doing well? How do I know I'm doing the right things? I think is a really tough one, and it's one that I need to keep working on.
One from Aisha. Would you share a typical day / week's menu plan, and like specific menu for a day before a match? You shared that 4,000 calorie day. I mean, how different would your suggestions be on average?
Well, I think from that example, what I try to do is, so was it a day before? A day before, was that what we say?
Yeah, she mentioned pre-game, yeah.
Yeah, so
yeah, day before.
Depending on the time of the match, obviously. But if we're looking at day before, I try to encourage an oats-based breakfast with fruit and the usual stuff, yogurts, fruit juices. I found that are not, you know, I know that we have to be careful from a dental perspective as well, but An additional fruit juice can help just to get in that extra bit of carbohydrate, and it can be better than some of the other, what Lucozade and things like that. But I tend to go for an oat-based breakfast, and I'm trying to get them to get in maybe 600 to 700 calories in a breakfast. We then make sure that they have something, a mid-morning snack. Again, I've had to compromise on some of these things, and I've had to go down the routes of bars and that type of thing, and maybe a drink of some sort. Again, the lads really like simple foods, so like a chicken and pepper wrap, and as long as we're getting good amounts of chicken in there, that would be a typical lunch. Again, maybe supported with a yogurt, maybe a Nature Valley oat bar, that type of thing. And then again, another snack in the afternoon. And again, depending on what they're trying to do, depending on what the targets they're trying to hit, then maybe we try and throw in a fruit smoothie or something like that. And then again, we try to keep it really simple in the evening with a good, a lot of the under 18s are in digs. And so it's kind of like just good, honest tucker evening meal fare, like a lasagna, a spaghetti bolognese, cottage pie, those types of things, that because we have to be realistic that sometimes the people that they're staying with who are cooking the food, they're relying on other people, they're relying on their parents most of the time to cook this stuff. So try and keep it as simple as possible.
Thanks, Adam. That's probably like the most important question, that with all the other stuff going on in a sports person's life, it's like, what do they eat on a day-to-day basis? That's essentially all our work is coming down to.
Yeah.
A question from Atif. He really struggles to recover after a game or a session of HIIT. It can take days. Now in my 40s, I've started to take organic supplements, protein supplements. Atif, if I can just respond to that one, it's the kind of thing we would need to know a lot more about you to know your whole picture and your whole nutritional patterns. So, feel free to email myself or Adam, and we can give you some input on that. So I'm going to move on to Belinda. Do you experience any difficulty where the players refuse to change their eating habits? If yes, what did you do?
Yeah, I think definitely I do, and I don't necessarily go into it's not perhaps as strict as that, I guess. We give them suggestions, we explain why these suggestions might be good for them, and then to a certain degree we let them make their own minds up. And there are, within any group, we've got from the under 9s to the under 18s, we're looking at hundreds of players, but in the let's take the scholars, the under 18s group, we've definitely got some, who are more willing to try different foods, more willing to eat salmon, more willing to try fish or things that they've not eaten before. I don't necessarily knock heads with the ones that aren't, just because of the environment that we're in, and there's so little time and so much work to do that it don't necessarily get that opportunity. I suppose that when I make myself available within that group, the ones that are wanting to take more information on are the ones that perhaps come and speak more to me, and maybe and actually, maybe I need to question that sometimes one of the lads I haven't spoke to for a while, why haven't I spoken to him? Is he not on board with it? And maybe I need to have those conversations with him. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily chase people up and make sure that they're doing it. Really, it's kind of up to them.
Thank you. All right. From Elliot, post-training question for glycogen refueling post-training or post-match. What would be the ideal reload food? Would you try and steer away from carbs in the form of gluten, pasta, etc., and keep it whole foods like sweet potato rice? Does it matter as long as the individual isn't celiac? and how much is an optimum amount of carb for efficient reload? There you go. Lots of stuff to get your teeth into there, Adam.
Yeah, lots. So in terms of, so it would come down to individuals in terms of what I'm recommending. If I have got some lads who really struggle digestively, gastrointestinally, so those types of I'm going to be recommending different things for different people. Also, I guess, I mean, I don't want to. It's hard when you talk about like what's the absolute optimum amount for glycogen resynthesis, and to be honest, to answer that, I'd go back to the research and I'd have a look at it, and I'd get my textbooks out and have a look. Really, I want to just try and get a meal into the lads. I want to make sure that they understand that eating in combinations can help them and can help them prepare for the next game. And so it's more like that. And I would guess that, possibly as you go through the levels, as you go up the levels a little bit more, then you're perhaps working a little bit more with, grams per kilogram and how much do you want to take on board. And, if I could get 100 grams of carbohydrate into my player after a match, then I'm really pleased with that. But my lads don't know what 100 grams of carbohydrate is. So I have to not talk in those ways and perhaps just talk in food. Food and maybe just say you need, within the next couple of hours, you've got to try and get a meal on board, a proper meal. And we do have examples of what those meals are. So we do have menu cards that we would give to them, and there's lots of different things. So yeah, I'm not, maybe that does answer the question. I don't know, but it's less detailed than that, I guess. It's more just encouraging them to try and get something on board.
Can I do a quick follow-up question on that? Do you go into enough health detail with your boys to understand if any have got gut issues, and you might steer away from the heavy pasta dinners and more towards a rice or sweet potato dinner?
Yeah, so we definitely do. Yeah, we definitely do. And again, these boys are fighting for a contract, a lot of them. And so sometimes they don't want to admit what they might think would be seen as a weakness and that type of thing. So it is very difficult to get. You ask the lads how they're feeling, and they're always tip top. I'm ready. Can you play? Yeah, I'm ready to play. So that is a challenge. But again, I think when I made the change to say that I was consistently going to be at the club at a certain time, certain day, certain times in the week, people knew I was going to be there, started to rely upon that. And then I started to get into, what was really going on. And and we do have particular protocols for some of the players where we try to support that side of things. I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure whether it's a long process of getting them to understand all of that. But yeah, I think we do.
Yeah, I guess it's an education and trust process that you're building up there. Question from Aisha, the other one who's done our course as well. Welcome. She was listening to a Radio 4 interview last weekend about nutritional advice to Premiership football teams. The consensus was that people aren't willing to give up ketchup, biscuits, and basic treats. How do you really educate adolescents on good eating habits with balance when it's so hard to see the benefits of eating well?
Yeah, I mean, that's a statement, isn't it? That's really difficult. And there's loads of stories, isn't there? I mean, I remember when Arsene Wenger came to Arsenal, and the story is he banned the mayonnaise, and the recent story about Ronaldo showing up at United and everyone refusing to have desserts. So there's lots of those stories that go on, and I think it's really difficult. And the boys will watch what the first team boys do. There's no doubt about that. It's very, very difficult to. One of the things I said to the academy manager was that when we start this process 2 years ago, maybe what we're trying to do is influence the under 9s who will be under 18s. And I thought, well, can I actually get away with saying that? Because that's like a 9-year process. But that was basically what I was saying, was that the change, the output, the sort of outlook and change within the football club takes years. It's going to take years. And maybe we'll, you never get certain things. And I'll only know if I've moved on to another club, what was different and what was going on. But yeah, it's a long process. And I think small wins are great wins that we need to cling on to,
I think a nice question to finish with is parental interaction that you've had. So Paul was asking, have you had problems with the parent support and or their ability to cook wholesome food? But likewise, you might have some parents that are totally on board, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is a balance. I think let's take, for example, I had a player who had type 2 diabetic parents, and so possibly stereotypically type 2 diabetic, and so very carb phobic, and so passing that on to their lad, very difficult for me to in little snapshots, maybe 5 minutes on a sideline here, maybe a 45-minute chat on Zoom, because it's most of the stuff has been on Zoom with the nature of what we've had. So it's very, very difficult to kind of re-educate about that. So we tried to drop in things around the club. We've tried to drop in little posters that will show people that athletes are perhaps using carbohydrates differently. If you're training 7 or 8 times a week across the week, and playing within that as well, then maybe your use of carbohydrates is going to be different to your sedentary father, and just trying to get that message out. But it is difficult. And again, I perhaps fall back onto the longer term thing that if I can show my face for long enough, and if they can trust the recommendations that I make, that maybe that behavior change will settle in. But I have 2 boys myself, and I know how difficult it is to stop them doing the things I don't want them to do and make them do the things I want them to do. So I think that, I'm lucky that my club, Cheltenham Town, have been very, very understanding in terms of the longer term approach to this. And that includes with parents as well.
Thank you, Adam. I think that was a great session. So thanks on behalf of everyone. We're already getting some nice thank yous through the chat box.
Great. Thank you.
Just to finish off, guys, as I said, this is the last one of the year. I'm in the planning. I've already done some of the planning for the 2022 webinars. So I'd love to hear from you in terms of topics and presenters even that you would like to see next year. And I'll take your input and my own thoughts and put together hopefully an amazing lineup next year as well. So thank you. Thanks, Adam. And thanks also to all the other presenters earlier than the year. So have a great festive season, and we'll see you early in January.
Thanks, Ian.